Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this liveegov.org training. As you can see on our first slide, we will be doing introductions and we will have an e-government overview just to explain a little bit about what we're talking about when we reference e-government. And then we'll have a demonstration of this web resource that's been created over the last 3 years. So this project is one that is ooh, just one second. I'm sorry. So this project is part of a IMLS National Leadership Demonstration Grant that the ALA and University of Maryland received 3 years ago, and we'll be finishing that up in August. And at ALA Annual this summer, we will have the big official launch of our website that you will be getting to look at today. And we really appreciate you being here with us. We hope that you'll find this a useful tool, and we look forward to getting your feedback as this is still a work in progress as we move forward. So the ALA and IPAC at University of Maryland, we worked with University of Illinois at Chicago, which is our Government Information Online piece of the website, and we also work with Towson University, and they did our evaluation for us at their Universal Usability Lab. And so we've really tried to ensure that this will be a useful... Ooh, is everyone hearing echoing? No, not here. Okay. Maybe you can try to talk lower. I'm not sure if that will help. Okay. I'll just talk a little lower. So, IPAC has really been the driving force in this project, and they have been the ones that have been creating the web resource, and then here at ALA we've been managing that process. And so we're thankful for all of their work, and then we have all of our partners. Now went softer. Okay. So we have partners, and I've listed them out here in a couple of different ways. We have our federal partners, where we have the Government Printing Office, the Internal Revenue Service, and Immigration and Citizenship, which is really what we think will be useful, and they have provided us with information that we hope will be incredibly useful to you and to your patrons as you seek to provide e-government services. And then we have state library agencies, Connecticut, Florida, Maryland, New Jersey, and Texas, and public libraries, Alachua County in Florida, Austin Public Library in Texas, Baltimore County here in Maryland, Caroline County here in Maryland as well, Cobb County in Georgia, Montgomery County in Maryland, Newark, New Jersey, and Pasco County in Florida. And we have one library consortium, which is Middlesex in New Jersey. And so we have been working with our partners, getting their feedback as we have been moving forward with the web resource in the last couple of years. And we look forward to sharing it with you today. And so I am going to pass this on over to Paul Yeager, I believe, is going to be giving us an introduction on e-government. And so you'll be hearing from a few people today from IPAC, Paul Yeager, John Berteau, Natalie and Ursula, and you'll be getting a pretty in-depth look at our web resource. And like I said, we really do appreciate you being a part of this today and hope that you'll give us your feedback at the end of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, welcome everyone. I've been asked to say a little bit of contextual information about e-government. Now, if you are working in a public library, you're already familiar with e-government. You may just not necessarily think of it that way. We have now a good 10 years plus, probably closer to 15 years in many locations, of people coming into libraries needing help with government services online. And about the early 2000s, there was a fairly large expansion of the use of online services by federal, state, and local governments. And that has continued to expand. And in many cases now, services that used to exist... Okay, sorry. that? Okay, we've adjusted the mic and now I'm closer to it. Hopefully we won't get echoing like Jessica was mentioning. So about 10 years ago or so, we saw a fairly large increase in how state, local, and federal agencies were starting to use the internet to not only provide information dissemination, but to start to move communication and direct services into the online environment. And that not only has increased in amount, but now in many cases, these services, communication, information may only be available online or are predominantly available online. So the reliance of people on e-government, the need to understand e-government, the need to use it, be literate in it, has grown to the point where it's kind of a necessity in a lot of contexts. If you're trying to apply for food aid or get support services or file your taxes or renew your driver's license or get a hunting permit or get a fishing license or one of many, 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 many other life functions ranging from fairly minor to incredibly significant, the ability to use e-government is now, in many cases, a requirement. So for people who don't have the literacy with the technology, don't have the access to the technology, don't feel comfortable using the technology, or don't have the literacy with government itself, they need an intermediary to help them. And in most communities in the United States, the only possible intermediary available, at least publicly, is the public library. Now, a lot of people can try family members and friends, but the one social institution that exists in most places to help you with e-government is the public library. And governments are aware of this fact. And you'll see sometimes, even on government websites, saying, if you have a question with this, please go to your nearest public library, or something along the same lines. So we've seen in our research about what libraries are doing with technology and with staff time, a fairly significant increase since about 2004 in the amount of time that's going into helping patrons with e-government. We've also seen a very big increase in the amount of training and classes and one-on-one help, and in some cases the creation of specific computers just for e-government, or whole services being brought into libraries to help with these functions, like bringing in people from one of the primary agencies for a certain number of hours a week to help people deal with specific needs, or many other options of trying to bridge this increased reliance on libraries by government agencies to ensure that people have the ability to use and access the information, communication, and services that they're putting online. We've seen with e-government, as it also becomes not only more profuse, but more complex, additional needs, these needs becoming more pronounced. At a time, originally, if it's just looking for information or communication, that's one sort of thing. But as these services become more and more large, like, say, filing for your immigration status, or complex things that require high bandwidth types technologies as more and more government functions are going through social media, we're seeing these issues with learning to use e-government or helping people use e-government or teaching them how to deal with a specific e-government service also requires more not just literacy of using the technology and some basic literacy about government, but also a fairly significant level of ability to interact with some of these higher end functions on the part of the librarian needing knowledge, or the librarian needing to understand the complexity of the problem. An example of this was a number of years back when the Medicare Part D sign-up happened, and many libraries had many seniors coming in saying, I don't know how to do this, and what plan should I sign up for? So there becomes the dual function of trying to find a way to help the person figure out how to solve their problem, that is, how do I do this, but also finding ways to help them find the right information to make a choice, which is which of these is right for me. And so the basic issue of e-government in a library is far from just technology. It's one of helping people with fear or unfamiliarity with the information and the technology itself, helping them deal with the government side of things, all of which may be very unfamiliar. But there's also the issue that most people coming into a library aren't going to say, I have an e-government problem. They're going to have some sort of major life need. And in that, the librarian not only needs to understand what's going on in terms of the technology and the basics of government, but helping the person figure out, are you talking about a local issue, a state issue, a federal issue? Are you talking about something that's a life problem that involves multiple different agencies? And so this intermediary role of the librarian in dealing with e-government has really become a complicated one, but also a very rich one in being a unique way to really help communities. And that's the key part of this. It is a big new amount of work to be doing that wasn't there before, people were commonly using the web 15 years ago. But it's also an enormous new opportunity as far as helping out communities and helping out individuals. And some of these e-government functions we've seen really do expand to, if you know how to do this well, you're not just helping one member of your community, you're really helping your whole community. The example that comes to mind with this that was most prominent was after the series of large hurricanes back in the mid-2000s, most prominently Katrina, we saw libraries performing amazing functions in helping huge numbers of displaced residents or people who were still there but needed assistance, dealing with FEMA, dealing with insurance forms, trying to locate lost loved ones, trying to get satellite pictures of what their community looked like or their own business or house. And all of those were not just e-government, but the FEMA ones certainly were directly e-government functions, and helping people fill out FEMA forms was a huge assistance to entire communities, large chunks of states. So the e-government service really is a natural extension of the public library's long history of serving the public good. So for all those benefits, though, it's also something that really does create a lot of extra need to have the technology, have the knowledge, have the ability to teach people to work with these things. And so this complicated dual nature of it both being a wonderful service and being something that does require a lot of work sets up why this project exists. We have the need to find ways to share our knowledge in the profession, to share resources, to share things we've designed ourselves, things we've found, share best practices, help each other negotiate this e-government service realm. Because many of these things are issues that a lot of other libraries will face. And if you come up with a unique way of presenting the materials, of helping people, or teaching the materials, it's a great thing for other libraries to be able to use. And if you encounter something that is a problem that you simply had never heard of, and many of these issues can be very regional. If you're in one of the states of the Great Plains, you may be much more likely to deal with people coming in who need your help negotiating the e-government sign-up form for federal distribution of water rights than if, say, you're in, I don't know, the Southeast. So if it's something you've never encountered before, also having a place to look for assistance and share ideas, it would be incredibly valuable. So with this project, With this project, then, what we are trying to do is meet some of these really important needs and help public libraries not only help provide better services in general in this area, but help each other in really creating a set of knowledge and tools to make e-government services better, less challenging, and more of a integrated across the community approach. So, who's next? So next you'll be hearing from John Berteau, also of the Information Policy and Access Center at the University of Maryland.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. So hopefully all of you can hear me. And what I'd like to do is just pick up on a couple of threads that Paul mentioned about the project itself and what we've managed to try and develop here on this behalf. So with that background, as Paul indicated, you know, we've had this explosion in services from governments moving everything to what I call sort of the e-environment, right? Trying to push more and more services out into that digital service context, whether it's actually completing forms and interacting with government that way, or pushing out various kinds of information and content through the constituencies that they serve. But as Paul indicated, this has created some various challenges for librarians and frankly for agencies, because as they're trying to figure out what they move to the digital environment, it's requiring entire sort of processes to be rethought and how we create this interactive space through an online form of communication. And so what we tried to do with this project is to create a space in which librarians and government agencies could come together. This is not intended as a direct-to-public service website. Rather, it's intended for government agencies, and we started at the federal level, as Jessica indicated, but we realized that this is a much broader context with state services and local government services as well. To really think about how, if libraries are the place within communities that people are going to increasingly for interaction with government services and resources, then how do we think about bringing agencies and libraries together? Because we think that there are a number of mutually beneficial relationships that could exist between government agencies and the public libraries as they think about providing services within communities to engage in government services and resources. So the goals of the site really are twofold, I think, at its core. One is to build a community of practice that includes agencies. We know that librarians are talking to one another, and there's certainly enough working groups within the federal government where they talk to each other about creating online services and e-government and a range of other things. But it's fairly rare in some cases that they systematically work together. Yes, there are pockets of government agencies or divisions within government agencies that work and reach out to public libraries, particularly through field offices and other things. But the idea was to bring the two together in a way that was collaborative and helpful to one another. So with that, the idea was to build this community of practice that includes, ways of sharing information, providing training and services and resources, sharing expertise, showing people, here's what's worked, here's what hasn't worked, here's what we've tried, and the types of partnerships that we've managed to build together. So you'll see some of that kind of a platforms to build that community of practice as Ursula and Natalie take you through the site in subsequent slides. And the second piece of the website itself really is all about how to, right? So it's how to decide what level of service to provide. There are public libraries for whatever reason that are sort of on the end of the spectrum of we have public access, right? We offer access to the internet and we have public access computers, and we try and get you started to help answer these questions that you might have. And then we have public libraries, and some of you are in those libraries, but certainly places like Hartford Public Library and others who have a much higher end approach to e-government services where they, for example, in Hartford's case, is on the immigration side, where they go all the way from language classes to citizenship classes to holding citizen swearing-in ceremonies in the library to also having a passport service, right? So they have a larger continuum, if you will, of services. And each of those has different implications for what it means in terms of the public library being able to provide and offer those kinds of services. And so, deciding what level of service you want to provide, how best to support users, also how best to identify community needs. I mean, yes, you know who walks in your door, but there are also a range of other things happening in your community, such as lack of access to broadband, digital literacy, or some other issues that may exist, and how to learn, about that and how you might best be able to provide those services. As well as current practices that exist within the library space itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Natalie and Ursula, who will walk you through some of the specifics of the site and how we've tried to weave those two themes, building the community of practice and how to, into the site.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Ursula Gorham, and Natalie Taylor and I will be walking you through the site now. So up here we have the e-government basics section of the site. And so when we thought about designing the site initially, we really viewed it as the provision of e-government services as a spectrum. So how much you decide to do and what you decide to do really depends so much on your library's available resources and the communities that you specifically serve. And so what we do here is we talk about, as Paul did, what is e-government? So if you're really starting at the beginning and you haven't really had too much experience in providing e-government services, this is where you want to begin. It basically narrates what Paul was saying in a condensed form. The next section of the site is literacy skills. So one of the other things we learned when we were working on the site is that there are a lot of prerequisites to being able to engage in e-government. And by literacy here, we mean financial literacy, digital literacy, English language literacy in some cases. And so we offer a variety of resources to help you get your users up to speed if this is an area where you think that they could use some assistance. Also included within e-government basics is a section that deals with legal issues. And so here we talk about what the difference between legal information and legal advice is. And this is something that you're probably familiar with, but we talk about it specifically within the context of e-government. And then we also talk about some issues that are a little bit more specific to e-government. So privacy and security. So if you want to create an environment where people are going to file their income taxes, what are the things you need to think about so that they're comfortable doing this? And as John mentioned, we also talk a little bit about community needs assessments. So when you think about the services that you should be providing, you really have to think about what your community needs. And so we talk about community needs assessments in general. How do you go about planning one? What do you do with the outcomes of these community needs assessments? But also recently we just added links to several tools, and this is from the census data, the broadband map, to help you learn more about your community. And then finally, we talk about partnerships. So one of the underlying themes of this whole website is a lot of times it doesn't make sense for you to try to do an e-government service on your own. There are already community organizations that are doing these sorts of things, and government agencies as well. And so maybe for specific e-government needs, it makes a lot of sense to partner with these different organizations. So we walk you through the process of identifying partners, linking up with them, and then making sure that the partnership remains valuable for everyone involved. So turning to the actual content of the site here, right now we're focused on two primary areas, and that's immigration and taxation. And within each of these areas, we've gathered together ready reference materials. As I mentioned, we view e-government service provision as a spectrum. And so in a lot of ways, these materials are the first step. So these are existing resources that we've compiled so that you only have to go to one place to find a range of materials related to taxation and immigration. These resources generally come from government agencies and nonprofit organizations that are already working in these particular spaces. And so these resources obviously can be helpful to you and your staff, but with many of them, you'll probably want to think about making them available to your users if you're not already doing so as well, because of the way they're written, because of who their intended audience is. They're very accessible to a lot of people, and it might be a way for you to get some very useful information out. And as Natalie will talk about in a couple of minutes, how we envision this linking together is either through your website or through different types of programming that you can do. So as you can see, immigration is broken down into 4 basic categories. Immigration 101 and education is probably where the bulk of the material is located. Immigration 101 is that basic material about the different processes and how USCIS works. Education, very key here because it goes through the different requirements for naturalization and permanent residence and things like that. You can explore the site at your leisure, but we did want to draw your attention to one particular resource under Immigration 101. And so, as I mentioned, one of the things that we learned is that with immigration, there's some pretty complicated processes that are going on. And 2 of the most common ones are naturalization and permanent residence. And so what we've done here is broken down these processes into discrete steps. And we did it this way because the reality of it is when someone comes into your library with a question in this area, you don't necessarily know if they're at the beginning of the process or maybe they're working their way through it and they're somewhere, as you can see in the middle, whether it's getting a visa or determining employment situation. And so what we hope is by doing the tool in this way, it allows you to insert yourself in the process where they need the help. That way you can identify not only where they are in the process, but also find the information to meet this specific need at that time. And within each step that you can click on, we link to relevant forums, guides, and other materials to help users navigate the process. This is the chart for permanent residence, and here is the chart for naturalization. So as you can see, naturalization is by far the more involved process. And one of the things that I wanted to point out that we did here was we made sure to include information about what happens after the application is submitted, because the process doesn't always just end right there. So what do you do if someone wants to know why they haven't heard anything? What do you do if someone wants to appeal an adverse decision, for example? And so I point this out just so that you can see that we really have viewed the process entirely and tried to help you and then ultimately the users at every stage of the process. So now moving to the taxation side, very similar to the immigration side, we've broken down the ready reference into 4 major categories. And again, the bulk of the information can be found in Taxes 101 and tax preparation. And I think particularly on the taxation side, one of our major goals was to pull out some of the very useful information that can be found on the IRS's website, but may be difficult to do so. So we've highlighted resources that can be used to answer frequently asked questions about tax forms, electronic filing. We also highlighted a number of interactive tools. So these tools are available through the website, but sometimes they can be a little bit difficult to find. And what's really important about these interactive tools is that they allow people to actually input information that's specific to their situation, so that way they can get information that's a little bit more targeted for them and probably a little bit more helpful than just reading a guide or a brochure. And again, I just want to point out one particular resource on the taxation side. So over the past year, we've been doing some usability testing and some previous training sessions. And one of the comments that we heard the most was that people really wanted more taxation information at the state and local level. The resources that we've been providing were at the federal level, and with taxation, as with a lot of other e-government issues, it's just not always that clear cut. And so a lot of times people are looking for information at all different levels of government. And so as a first step, what we've done is added some resources that provide state-by-state listings. So these are essentially links to different government agencies and organizations that do a map of the United States. You can click on the state that you're interested in. And it's not going to provide you with a lot of details about individual states, but it does at least point you to resources that will answer basic questions about tax laws, tax rates, and related issues. It's a good starting point, and at this time, we're still working on building this out because we do think that this is a particularly interesting need to address. And so now I will turn it over to Natalie, who will talk about the other section of the site, which is at your library.
Thank you, Ursula. I also want to note at this point, as you've noticed so far, we're not actually going through the site itself, mainly because we thought it would be more helpful to highlight particular parts to show you as we're going through it. But we do want to let you know the URL is libegov.org, libegov.org. If you want to see this information, it is live on the web, so you can see all the stuff we're talking about. Okay, so the At Your Library section. As I've mentioned, there's several places you can fall on the continuum of e-government service. And this is going to depend a lot on your community, a lot on the resources of your library, as we've mentioned. But we wanted to identify some of the things you can do if you feel it is a need of your community and you are able to provide further resources beyond ready reference. And that's what we've called At Your Library. You can see from this page, we've divided it up into, the web address, Ursula is actually going to type it in. So you can see we've divided it again into the categories of taxation and immigration, and then also this third step of building a comprehensive program, which I'll talk about in just a second. Within each of these points, within taxation and within immigration, we've divided them further into programming and building an online presence. This third section, building a comprehensive program, is actually something we're still working on. We're trying to figure out how best to identify all of these steps on the continuum, and that's something we actually could really use feedback from our users at a later date as you've gotten a chance to work through the site. So moving into the sections we have developed, going into the programming section within each of taxation and immigration. This programming area includes things like how to get speakers to your library, how to put on classes, how to provide legal assistance, and then subject-specific information, so for taxation, tax prep assistance, and immigration, passports, and conversation programs. And within each of these, we have things like how you find the speakers, how you find a class leader, someone to lead the class, lesson plans and resources. USCIS, for example, has a ton of lesson plans that you could use in your library if you wanted to do classes on citizenship. Program evaluation ideas, and then also examples of successful events within each of these categories. And we wanted to highlight all of this because this is something you're already doing in your library, most likely. But you may not necessarily be directly connecting it to e-government, and this is a way that we can tie in those resources from Ready Reference that can take you a step beyond just giving your patron a link or something like that. It can also be helpful if you have a lot of different patrons coming in and asking the same questions. You could save some time, perhaps, by offering a class or something like that on a specific issue that you notice is a need of your community. So I do want to offer just a couple of examples of these. In the At Your Library section, the classes, this is under the heading Immigration. Again, we highlight a lot of things like course development content, things that nonprofits have developed. There's a lot of that stuff out there. And then also, again, like I said, the best practices is what we're referring to these libraries. I also want to note, we know that there are a lot of public libraries doing a lot of cool things out there, and we've only been able to highlight very few of them on the site. That's actually something going forward. We want to include more of what you're doing, and we'd love for you to let us know what you're doing and to post it in the forum. But for now, an example of what we're talking about in this At Your Library best practice classes, in Boulder, they actually have a multicultural outreach department with a cultural outreach librarian, and they partner with a community group in the area to offer weekly citizenship classes and English conversation classes. And you can see from this example, we've tied in a lot of the things we've been talking about before. Things like the community needs assessment. They noticed they had a high population of immigrants who needed the citizenship courses. And then, of course, literacy needs, which operate on a wide spectrum of levels, not only the civic literacy that is involved in the actual citizenship process, but also the language literacy that's present in the English conversation classes. And you can get all of this data from a variety of sources, which, again, we've listed in those e-government basics areas. So moving into taxation, we also have further example with the tax prep assistance. Again, this is an area that libraries are actually handling fairly well at this point. I know you may have a lot of questions around this time of year. Maybe this is a touchy subject right now. But speaking for the rest of the year, the IRS has these programs, the VITA program, also the TCE program, and tons of libraries offer these sort of spaces for these programs in their libraries. And this is an excellent example of how important partnerships are. You may not necessarily be a tax expert, but you do, as a librarian, have the resources to find groups in your area that are experts and are willing and want to come in and help. It also involves things like legal issues where, in this case, using a partner who is well-versed in the taxation world, you don't have to be putting yourself on the line by answering tax questions you may not be able, or not that you should answer. And again, we list that back into the e-government basics section in the legal assistance area, which this is just how to protect yourself in your library. It's very unlikely you would actually be sued, but it is a concern that you should think about limiting the space and the parameters of the type of assistance that you are willing to provide. So then we move into the beyond the in-person space with building a website. We break this down into taxation, so things like financial resources and tax prep, and then immigration, the legal assistance, and basic information. And the things you want to include on this are pretty straightforward. Again, you probably know a lot of this already. You're probably doing it. You may be doing it in e-government spaces, but you're definitely doing it in other spaces. Things like introducing the subject, providing key links, and offering things in an easy-to-read format. And that last point is particularly important when it comes to government information, because a lot of the links that you might think are the best things to, the most reliable sources and things like that may not be written in a way that your patron can understand. So you're having to balance, that balancing act of the best possible and most comprehensive website, but also explaining what that means. And we've offered an example here. Hartford Public Library's taxation preparation page is actually quite good. It includes local IRS information, tax prep help, including the hours and the dates for their VITA program, and then also a list of important documents. And in this way, they've incorporated literacy needs and acknowledged their patrons' desire for both in-person and digital help. So not only are they providing the information for people who might just want to stay at home and do it on their own, but they're also offering this in-library programming option. So these are just two examples. As you'll look on the site and as you go through the site, you'll see we have numerous other best practice options, but all of these sort of take into consideration the underlying e-government basics we discussed earlier, the vast amount of information that you have to weed through that we've kind of tried to address with the Ready Reference section, and then also the fact that you are a space in your community, you are a place where people come for information and for that in-person kind of one-on-one or one-to-many, I guess, in the case of classes, assistance. And so if you do have the resources and you do want to move beyond the list of links or the handing a card or something like that, these are some really good options to take that next step. But we also know that many of you may find that you have patrons that have very specific questions that we haven't been able to include on the site. And to address that need, we also have an interactive component we've linked to called Government Information Online that John Berteau is going to discuss next.
Yeah, thanks, Ned. So very quickly, one of the pieces that we've integrated into the site is the Government Information Online. It is a digital reference service, so it's basically an Ask a Librarian service, and many of you are familiar with through things that exist within your state. For example, here in Maryland, we have Ask Us Now, and I'm sure you may have counterparts to that within your states or regions that you may have access to. But this one is special. In particular, it is focused on providing government information through a consortium of depository libraries. So Government Information Online is a consortium of about 24 different depository libraries. Some of them are state library agencies, some are academic libraries, law libraries, and various others scattered throughout the U.S. And what GIO does is allow you to post questions. Perhaps you're looking for a legal document or something else that people have asked for, and you're having trouble locating it. You can post a question through the GIO digital reference service, and they try and get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. Usually faster than that, since they have a number of different libraries that participate. So this service, which is our University of Illinois Chicago partner in this, because it's coordinated through them, is built into the site for you to be able to ask questions and get that kind of content and information back to you for being able to provide additional information to the people you're serving. With that, though, I'll turn it back so that we can start wrapping up a bit.
Okay, so we just wanted to finish up by pointing out some of the interactive features of LibGov. And I think as we've stressed throughout this presentation, we can put the information out there, but we really want you to help build the site out. And so the forum, as we've talked about, is one place where we envision where librarians can connect with each other as well as with government agency officials. So ask questions, share best practices, share war stories, just something so that way you can feel more connected to the e-government community. And so we've heard a lot that in the past, librarians have from time to time been a little bit surprised about some developments in e-government, whether it's the shift from paper-based filing to electronic filing or things like that. And so the forum could be a place where people can give each other a heads up about these sorts of things. Another interactive feature we have is our Twitter feed. The handle is @LibGov, as you can see up on the screen. Right now, it's mainly being used to pass along information from the IRS and USCIS, as well as to promote our trainings and webinars. But in the future, we hope that it will serve as a means for librarians to connect with each other about e-government matters. I just want to note with the forum, you will need to register for the site if you want to use the forum at all. And we really do encourage you to register with the site because then you will be able to use the bookmark feature, which is up in the upper right-hand corner, where that way it allows you to bookmark pages of interest so that way you can come back to them if you find yourself getting questions in certain areas. So at this point, we're actually going to open up the floor for questions and comments, but I want to add that if we either don't get to your question or it's something that you think about later, please feel free to post it in the forum. And actually, we want to say right now, if you wanted to take a couple of minutes, go look at the site quickly, and then come back with your questions, that's fine. We're sitting right here.
So the first question we have is, what other e-government areas are you planning to put on the site? That's a great question. John, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I knew you were going to pass that one on to me. So actually, we've had requests. There are a few areas that we know that we want to start getting into. One is Social Security. We've had a lot of requests, particularly as literally thousands of people start moving over and retiring and receiving Social Security benefits. So that's one. And so we've been reaching out to Social Security Administration about that. Some of these, as you can imagine, get a little tricky, right? Because there are certain things that we can and can't do, I think, as facilitators. And oftentimes the agencies want to be able to control and control the conversation between clients and their services, right? So I mean, there's some issues there, but Social Security is one. The second is health, especially with the Affordable Care Act. As states start implementing their exchanges starting in the fall. So, for example, here in Maryland, Maryland was one of the first states to move into the exchange space and was approved to have their exchange become operational in the fall of 2013. We anticipate that a number of people will end up in public libraries trying to ask about the Affordable Care Act and how they can find information about it and various options and things like that. So we know from our perspective, the two that we want to be able to move into, right now are going forward are Social Security and health. I'm working with HHS. But if you have others that you'd like to recommend, I think that would be, we would be very much open to that. The second issue, though, that we know is that each of these has state counterparts. So the Affordable Care Act is a perfect example of that, right? In Maryland, we're going to have our own a state-based exchange, and therefore we'll also need to link into Maryland-specific kinds of content for the libraries in Maryland. So we are working on that. Yep, unemployment, that's right. So we have those kinds of issues that we're trying to work through. I hope that answered your question.
So the next question, well, Facebook is an easy one. We're not on Facebook. If there is interest in that, we'd love to hear from it. That's certainly something we could do, expanding further into social media. We chose Twitter just because it seems like a lot of public librarians are in that space, but we are interested in making it as easy as possible for you all to connect with each other and with us. So definitely shoot us an email, post on the forum, send us a tweet, whatever, feedback on where you would like us to be. How are you planning to publicize the site in the library community? Jessica might actually be the best person to answer that. If she's here. Maybe not. I can try while she's trying to get her communication working. So we're publicizing the site right now through Twitter. Again, you can see we've actually added some more people following, trying to develop that sort of stream of pushing out information. We are presenting a training at ALA this summer, and we are also doing another webinar in May. We've done a variety of local trainings around the area in Maryland, and we would certainly be willing to do more for your specific library or things like that if you need that. We will also be, I was just reminded, we will also be presenting this at the New Jersey Library Association in June as well. So that's what we've got right now. If you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them, and we would love your help in getting the word out about this, because the more people who are using it and the more people who are adding content and talking in the forum and in the variety of social media spaces, the better it will be, the more helpful it can be.
So I see that someone's commented on the fact that we have some broken links. This has been an ongoing problem as we've been working on the site. Pretty much every time we go through the site, we find more links, and that's due to just the constant restructuring of the IRS website. So it's something we're working on as we think about the continuity of this project. But thank you. Let us know whenever you see something that's broken. We try to keep up with it, but it sometimes outpaces us.
Right. Jessica just noted in the chat box, in case you didn't see it, that we will be presenting at ALA annual. So. Actually, that's a good question. Since we're just launching, we haven't done a report function yet. Let's see. What we can do is create a space on the forum for that, and in the meantime, you can just email us. Really, you can do either. We check both, but I'll try to set up something on the libgov.org that's something where you guys can speak directly to us about things like links and other issues with the site you may be having. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Or question.
So one thing I have, this is John, I have a question for you folks. One of the things that we know we need to do, and we're trying to figure out how best to do it, and if you're interested in helping us, we would definitely appreciate it. So we have the challenge of, e-government is a huge space, and even just within the federal government, there's lots and lots of pieces, right? But we know that we need to get down to the state and local levels, and if you would be willing to help us or point us to resources, one of the things we would envision is, having a capacity to try and work with different issues at sort of that national level, but then allow, for librarians who might be, say, in Florida or Texas or Montana, wherever you might be, to sort of pass them off to other spaces for resources at the state level. We're very much interested in how we make that connection so that we can get to the various levels of government and e-government services. So if you have suggestions on that, or if you're willing to assist us. We've been reaching out sort of quietly to state library agencies and others as how best to think about that, so that we can have a more sort of local through federal approach to the site. So I throw that out. We're very much interested in that piece, and we know it's a necessary piece, but we're not exactly sure how best to implement that, particularly given some of the issues that we've had, even just harnessing the national level and federal government aspects of e-government. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Arlene. Yep.
We're writing these suggestions down. Thank you. If there are any more questions, please just feel free to throw them in the chat box right now. Or suggestions, or criticisms. We can take it. So Diane, we're going to be doing a variety of different webinars, presenting at ALA Annual, and then we have the social media function as well. And we're also available to do more webinars for your specific library or the state at the state level, if that's of interest.
Or weddings or birthdays or bar mitzvahs.
Paul apparently will do weddings and birthdays and bar mitzvahs. I don't know about that. If you want e-government spoken at your wedding ceremony, then that is, I guess, an option. Thanks for attending, Peggy. Good luck at the reference desk. Hopefully you don't get too many last-minute tax questions.
Yeah, I agree. Those are very good resources, the Congressional Research Service reports. I think we'll definitely look into including that onto the site. Thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you, Carol. All right, so it seems like, oh, wait, another question. That's a really good example of a partnership, and I think that's something we would love to hear about, hear more about what you're doing. And that, Edward, that's definitely the type of information we'd like to hear about in the forum, because I think knowing how you were able to connect with them are valuable lessons that other people could benefit from.
Thank you.
So the site is live right now. All of the different components should work. If they don't, please let us know. I think it's an iterative process. We aren't anticipating that this, hopefully there won't be a type where it's static and ends, just because we want it to keep growing. But if there is a specific area that you think definitely needs to be immediately improved or something like that, then yeah, definitely let us know. But the site is usable right now and ready to go.
You can send suggestions either through the Contact Us link or through posting them in the forum.
So it seems like people might be having to leave. We want to just go ahead and say we can stick around for a few more minutes if you have questions. I noticed a couple people maybe are still typing in the chat box, so please continue to do that. But if you do have to go, thank you so much for attending. And if you have any questions, again, forum, the Contact Us, the Twitter feed, all of that is available for you to contact us and let us know what's going on, what you think.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.